We are here live today with Dr. Aduragbemi Banke-Thomas. He is an associate professor of global maternal health at University of Greenwich in England. He's also a visiting research fellow at London School of Economics and Political Science. Thank you very much for joining us. Maybe you can just, I think I already introduced you, and we've already taken some time. So if you don't mind just giving us a brief summary about, just, I know I mentioned a few things about you, but just, what you're doing now, what your research work currently is on.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me. I think I can start from an update of where I am. First of all, so I am Associate Professor of Maternal and Newborn Health at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. I think in between when we set up this event and now I've moved to LSHTM, and I'm now visiting professor at the University of Greenwich. I'm also visiting professor at École des Hautes Études en Santé Publique in France. Like you said, also a visiting research fellow at the London School of Economics. One other position that I really cherish quite a lot is my affiliation with the Maternal Reproductive Health Research Collective, and I can see a number of colleagues who are here, where I'm health systems research lead at the collective. A lot of my work is quite focused on maternal newborn health generally, and I have over 15 years of experience actually conducting I guess, say, impactful research in maternal, adolescents, sexual and reproductive health globally. And, several of those are published in diverse academic journals. I'm also editor and section lead for maternal newborn health at the PLOS Global Public Health. And I serve in a few editorial boards of a few other journals. I'm really passionate about what I do. I can stay here all day talking about research and work that's been done to change and improve outcomes for pregnant mothers and their babies, especially those in Africa and those who have left Africa to have babies or, for whatever reason, in high income settings. So that's a brief nutshell of the work that I do.
Thank you very, very much. And, maternal health is something that's still shamefully very pressing. And unfortunately, also, we would think that in all developed countries, I'm currently in the US, and maternal mortality is still a problem, especially in women of color, and most especially in Black women. And but of course, we're talking about the African continent. I know several countries have improved. I have a colleague friend who works in Sierra Leone, and she shared a graph that showed the decline of Sierra Leone maternal mortality of over 1,000 per 100,000 live births to less than 500, and that's been very, very impressive just by them setting up an OB-GYN and pediatric and neonatology residency, equipping the hospital, and also doing community outreach. Unfortunately, I saw the map and I was like, Nigeria is still where it was. It's like we're maintaining a plateau, and there's still a lot of work that's been done, but where is the impact? Where are the outcomes? And, those are the things that feed into why we're having this conversation. So thank you very much for introducing yourself and your current role, and congratulations on, your new position at School of Tropical Hygiene and Medicine. Next, I want to move on to what your inspiration is. Like, what inspired you to extend your research into African countries? Because, we've moved abroad, you can just do what everybody's doing or what is readily available around you, but it does take not just a will, but a lot of work to actually come and do research in African countries. So if you could share that with us.
Sure, Dr. Fulak, I'm happy to do that. I think for me, honestly, I've not had to extend my work to African countries. My research has always been in African countries, So if at all anything, I've extended my research from Africa to the world. This, for me, is where my research has meaning. I'm, like I mentioned earlier on, I'm super passionate about contributing my little bit to ensuring that women have access to care when they need to, they experience the best care when they have accessed that care, and that the ultimately outcomes of care are improved for women when they do engage with health services. So a lot of my work has really focused on research on pregnant women and their babies in Africa. And I've followed those who have left Africa, for whatever reason, whether to move, to relocate, whether to seek asylum, for the want of a better word, whether to japa, to places that they have settled across the world, and to ensure that that whole continuum of care, is optimized for them. You did mention specifically about the outcomes for Black and ethnic minority women in the US. It's the same in the UK where I work. And quite recently, I've been doing a lot of work looking at migrant populations, accessing care also in the UK. And I remember there was an update on what we call the Embrace data. It's called Embrace in the UK. It's the same number, 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy and childbirth complications. It was the same number 4 years ago when it was initially released. It's the same number. So I was like, look, what's the point? Why even bother releasing the data? What has been done in the meantime? Between that time and now. So for me, back to Africa, Africa is where my skills, my expertise, my knowledge, and all of that's where I feel it's most needed. And now you know I'm in Africa because the electricity just went off. There we go. There we go. So I'm actually here. So so earlier on this year, for example, WHO released the latest estimates for maternal mortality across the globe, and 282,000 women die every year. Oh dear. Yeah, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, super. Okay, that didn't change. Okay, so 282,000 women die every year due to complications of pregnancy and childbirth. 87,000 of those women, are from Nigeria alone. You talked about Sierra Leone making significant progress. That's the success story of the year, as far as I am concerned. Because it was Sierra Leone, South Sudan, Nigeria that had a lot of significant high numbers. But Nigeria has remained in that. If you extend that across sub-Saharan Africa, we're looking at 190,000 deaths. 67% of those deaths that I mentioned across the world happen in sub-Saharan Africa. So really, for me, there might be something to do everywhere in the world, like the issues you raised in the US and in the UK, like I mentioned. But really, there's a lot more work to do in Africa. And for me, that's why I do what I do.
Thank you so much for that. That's just, I'm actually having goosebumps because it's bad, but sometimes you hear the numbers and they're jarring. They are jarring. There was a recent, what's it called? Like an ad, a video that was circulated on Facebook, and not Facebook, just on social media. I saw it on LinkedIn, where basically they kind of tried to depict maternal mortality in the form of a plane crash. And, I'm actually having waves of goosebumps just thinking about it, because when a plane crash happens, it's something that's so rare, but it's very shocking because it's sudden, it's big, it makes a mess. But maternal mortality is like quietly, silently just ripping families apart, taking lives. And in families, and honestly, we don't hear because there's the ripples, there's children that become orphans, there's households that are torn apart, and so many things that happen. But it's almost like their voices and their cries are muffled, and we just need to find a way to amplify that and figure out a way to really actually solve the problem, because a lot of work has been done, but where is it? So thank you very much for sharing that, and I hope that
can I just draw attention to that video you just talked about, because those who created that video are on this call actually. Our group, I can picture.
And you guys did such an amazing job, because it's communication really is about getting it across. And people who don't know will be like, oh my God, it is that much. I knew, but it just gave it another, like a shock value. And thank you so much. That was very innovative. That was just really, really lovely, even though, it's like, it's not a nice topic, but it was a really, really impactful video. So thank you.
Good job to say. Well done, guys.
Okay. So in like you said, your work has really been in African countries, and now it's extending to the world. But particularly in going to African countries, we know how, funding is, and many of the funders prescribe their rules, right? The eligibility, the criteria, what you should work on, what they want to see, and where. So how did you, or do you still access funding, and how do you connect with collaborators for your work?
Gotcha. Excellent question. Thanks a lot for that. So I think the way to sort of approach this question is to break it down. So there is the accessing funding, and then there is the connect with collaborators. There might be some links in between, but I think it's important to sort of attack those separately. So let's talk about accessing funds, first of all. And I think when I think about my journey, my first real break actually was during my PhD. Actually, I remember taking this course on grant making then, and then I thought, okay, let's practice that and put it together. And then I had this opportunity to put in a submission then to some call. It was called Innovate Lagos. Actually, it was called Innovate Lagos, and that was quite revolutionary then when a state government was partnering with funders globally and putting up a call where local researchers based in Lagos State then were meant to partner with collaborators from wherever, put in competitive bids, and then come up with research that was meant to solve some of the most challenging problems in Lagos State there. Quite impressive stuff. So, I did partner with a senior colleague who is now a professor actually in Lagos, and we got that grant and we ran it, and it was a fantastic project. That was the beginning. Again, I keep going back to what I said earlier on, that a lot of what I've done really started from back home for me. And since then, I've been very privileged, I must say, to have won a number of grants with other funders, AXA Research Fund, BMGF, and one of my recent funders has been Google. And I'm really grateful. I'm not saying this is experience of everyone. I remember a colleague of mine saying that winning research grants is like a lottery. What you just have to do is to make sure that you are in there, because you never know when you'll be picked, and it's true, it almost feels like you have a higher chance of having a plane crash than getting a research grant these days. It's really tough. But I would then say that there are huge opportunities, and I think we can talk about this later, that it looks like the world is changing, and there's a lot of opportunities for researchers in Africa. I'll come back to that later. To the second part of your question, which is connecting with collaborators. Well, for me, with collaborators, I started with those that I knew first. And I dare say that your friends that you share the passion, that are passionate about what you do, right? They're passionate about that your research of interest. Mine is maternal and newborn health. Wake me up 2 a.m., 3 a.m., whatever time you've got me, that's where I wanted to start from. And then gradually I started expanding those networks. Many were colleagues who have frankly become friends, and some even family. And like I said, we share similar passions. I think the other way that I got to connect with collaborators was paying attention to those who are publishing in the field. And this means I wasn't just trying to read the big journals all the time. Sometimes you need to read the ones that are not so big, because we know it's not so easy to get money to publish, research in some of the big journals for African researchers. So I had my ears, my eyes peeled to what was being published, that was related to what I was doing. And that was another good place to source people to collaborate with. the field is very small, I must say, and somehow the more you are active, I think the more you realize that you know people who are working in your area. So again, just for me, myself being active in the field also meant that I was able to connect with people who were doing things that I was doing. Hey, I saw your paper that you did. Oh, fantastic work. Of course, you want to make sure that you are celebrating the excellent work that people are doing despite being in very challenging circumstances. And then, it would be nice to catch up, let's talk about maybe doing something together, etc. So that was certainly another way to connect with people. Colleagues that I did my degrees with, and I'm sure many people, probably those on this call, I can see putting guys here, interesting. Good to have you. Would say the same thing, that, colleagues that you studied with that maybe did your MPH or did your PhD with, whether it was when I was in the UK or in France, those people are part of my network, just naturally, we studied together, we know exactly how we worked together while we were studying. So, it just made sense that they were part of my network. Strangely, I didn't even know where Twitter was before, or what about having an account. But honestly, that space has generated lots of. It's been a strong platform for some solid collaborators, and I will certainly encourage people who do research to share it on Twitter. And why do I think Twitter and not LinkedIn? Please, I'm not trying to be unprofessional. But I think Twitter is the space where you make one tweet and tag the right organizations, and then boom, everybody's talking about it. And I can say that happened to me with just one publication, and somebody, it was tweeted, and Google saw that publication and reached out to me to fund my research. So I definitely think that's a space to be. And maybe one last point to make is about conferences. Strategically choosing conferences where you go to, going to presentations from colleagues. It's a very relaxed environment, and you can reach out to people, meet the human side of them. I tend to tell many of my PhD students that the publication is the publication, but there's a person behind that publication. And when you meet that person, you have a better chance of having developing a stronger collaboration with them than just simply reading their paper. Okay, so certainly I do that. And, recently I was at the FIGO conference, which was the Federation of Obstetricians and Gynecologists conference in Paris. My goodness, there are some amazing African researchers doing phenomenal work in Africa, outside Africa, everywhere. And I was able to meet them, and forge new partnerships, discuss mutual interest, and watch out. You will see some of those, results of those collaborations coming out over the next couple of months into years. Yeah, I hope I've answered your questions, but those are some of the ways that I think collaborations and accessing funds can be done. I think you're mute. You're mute. Okay.
Yes, you did answer my question, and thank you very much for that. Very elaborate and just giving us multiple ways to be able to access funding. And you're very correct. Many times you have an idea for this big project, you have all these ideas, but it's always the people around you. You start small, start local, and you build together, and you never know who has access to what, or who something stumbles on, and then they bring it into the fold, and everybody can, pick from there. So in all of this journey so far, doing the work, working with people, getting funding, getting publications, all of that, tell us some of the challenges that you faced, and how you were able to overcome some of them, and the ones that are still tenuous.
Oh dear. Well, I think again, I think I've had a very charmed research career, to be honest. I say that because I know that the space is a lot more challenging than I've experienced. And, I think some of these things are really serendipity, essentially. But I think if I had to reflect on this question on challenges, it would be maybe finding quality people. When I did have that challenge, I think it was, that was a time I remember praying to find quality people. This was prayer, like, it was proper prayer. Please, God, just help me to find quality people to work with. I really did. There was a lot of time when I was in my early research career days when I felt like, sometimes, I was part of even some collaborative work where I did all the work or almost all the work. That has changed a lot now, but if I had to flag that as a challenge, then that was the case. But I think also generally the sort of number of quality people that one can see. And I don't know if it's just because the times are changing, people are really growing in expertise. I think that's one of it. But it's also because I'm also a lot more aware of, who to be reaching out to and just making sure like minds are, I'm working with like minds and people who are as energetic as I am. But then also on the ground, because you can't do all the work together, you really want to build solid teams around you. And I feel like when I look at some parts of Africa, again, I refuse to see Africa as a homogeneous space. I feel like there are some parts of Africa that people do research better. Kenya is definitely one of them. The Gambia is definitely one of them. I would add Uganda also to that list, where South Africa definitely, where there's just a higher capacity, generally, when you look at the universities in those countries. But I think sometimes securing research assistants, who can help you do the work on the ground, can be a challenge. When I did some big research work in Kenya, for example, I quickly learned that when you're going into the field and you're saying, I need people who can, for example, speak in Swahili. Good stuff. They can speak in Swahili, but can they conduct interviews in Swahili? It's one thing to be able to speak in Swahili. It's a different thing to be able to conduct research interviews. So you're looking for someone who has that package together, that they can really speak the language properly, and they also have capacity to actually do good research. So I think sort of securing people on the ground would be one. Beyond that, there are perennial problems that remain. We still talk about funding, and I think, again, I can talk about this later if you if we talk about that. But I feel like there's this shift that is happening right now. There was a time where maybe funding was a big challenge for researchers locally in African countries. I think that there's a flip going on. I think so. I think with the whole decolonizing global health space right now, that there is this flip going on. And I don't want to bite my tongue about this in the next couple of years, but whether it's to tick the box, we've given Africa money, or it's really a genuine movement, I feel like the tide is turning. But funding remains a perennial problem. There are lots of excellent ideas that people want to do, that I certainly want to lead. I'm looking for money right now as we speak. I probably will get off this call and go back into writing another grant application. We keep chasing money, and that does not change. One other one that I would like to flag is, it's a very interesting one, because I feel that you start noticing this even more when, again, within the same context of this sort of decolonizing global health. So you're doing research, but also, are you deemed in the global community as the right voice to elevate that research, if that sort of makes sense, right? Are you the one to be allowed to be published in the Lancet, global health, or are you the one allowed to be published? Is your name appropriate enough to be the first author in the Nature? Now I know how to send those emails back to the editor to tell them, do you know who I am? I think I'm now in that position, but you certainly have to go through that. And I remember I submitted an article to a journal that I will not name. And And one of the reviewers wrote that, that it's good to see the sort of work that that's come out from here, but you don't expect data of this sort of high quality from these parts, these places in Africa. And I was like, whoa, whoa. And the editor looked at it and said, yeah, we're a bit concerned about the data, and rejected the paper. After going through 2 rounds of reviews with 4 different reviewers. But again, that space is moving. We have new journals that are coming up and challenging the status quo. People are calling people out right now, so it's good. Those are challenges, but we are meeting them and we're seeing the opportunities even in those challenges.
Thank you so much for that. That's quite deep, and decolonizing research, honestly, and that's part of the huge problems, like I mentioned earlier, in terms of funders predefining. I was reading an article and someone was talking about that the world has been developing countries for decades. Why are developing countries remaining underdeveloped? It is because the owner of the problem is not allowed to define the solution.
Yeah.
The person who is sympathizing with you, quote and unquote, is the one who says, oh no, this is what we want. Yes, it's your money, true. But I mean, enrichment comes from somewhere. And we know that Africa has enriched the world. So that's why I'm personally not averse to, I will collect the money.
Let's go there.
I will collect the money, okay?
Yeah.
But so these are some of the touching issues. And yes, that journal thing is real. And many people face it. You hear these things and, talking about you're not expecting data of this quality. So are you calling me a liar?
Yeah, that was exactly what you suggested. Yeah.
And that's based on your myopic bias of you just don't think, So when they say racism in medicine, racism in research, and this is how those things manifest, and it just trivializes and just rubbishes the work of thousands and thousands of people. So thank you very much for sharing that and just bringing that to light. In terms of opportunities, or before we even go to opportunity, what are the gaps that you think exist or you have seen that exist between research that's done in African countries and other parts of the world that are, some of them are probably global north, developed Western countries, and some of them are maybe still be considered global south, but we know that, okay, yes, they may do better research, maybe like Southeast Asia, and things like that. So gaps, differences.
Gotcha. Excellent question. Thank you. So I'm very pro-Africa, sorry. So I think, first of all, I think it might be a bit unfair to sort of label the research in Africa as a homogeneous bunch, first of all, right? I think there are certainly excellent pieces of research, and also lots of not so good research that come out of Africa. But actually, you will find that exist all over the world. As an editor, I see a lot of these papers, and I quickly reject them. I don't waste time. You reject them. I remember one research. This was early on in COVID. I have to be careful about this, saying the right thing. Early on in COVID, where there were some researchers that published something from somewhere, right? And they were trying to, trying to make sure I say just enough to not explain it in detail, but capture point. But basically, what they had done, they were trying to estimate the burden of COVID in Africa, and we didn't really know so much on what was going on that time. So they wanted to model it, and they used assumptions based on how it was spreading in Italy. to estimate how it would look like in Africa. Also considering that, the African health systems, according to them, were worst in the world. So essentially, this disease was going to kill all of Africa. I think everybody here is still alive and made it out of that place. So quickly, you see that sort of research and you're like, no, this must not see the light of day. And if you're an editor and you are there to be the gatekeeper of sound knowledge going out, then it sort of makes sense that, you point that out, you call that out and say, no, this is not going through. So you see it everywhere. You find them all over the world. What I find though is that what I find that is different is maybe the capacity to do high quality research is not ubiquitous in Africa, right? It's not everywhere that you find it. You find people who are doing stuff, good stuff in different parts of the continent, or you find particularly good people and everybody is going to those people. Every time there's something good that you want to do, you go to those people because you've kind of identified them. But that's also changing. We are having lots more solid researchers that know their stuff in Africa. I was speaking to a colleague earlier today in Nigeria, and we were talking about how few the number of clinical trials that have emerged from a country like Nigeria. We just don't have that sort of strong capacity for, clinical trials in the country. Yes, there are clinical trials going on. We're part of some that are going on right now in the country. But it's just not like the way it is in other places. Also, I think that there are some issues with the system that enables and uses the research. All right. So, for example, I personally don't think a number of IRB committees, ethical approval committees, really realize what purpose they are there for. I don't think some of them realize that they're there to protect humans, right, from the research. Some just spend more time correcting your English language. I'm like, did you read this protocol at all that is submitted? And you're expected to pay, $30 or $150, and then you must be punished for submitting your research from abroad to Africa. You must be punished by paying more, which I think is fair. You raise more money for doing that. But we also left this Africa, so calm down for us, okay? But there's also the flip side of those who sort of who should be consuming the research, right? And the policymakers, and how much of the local evidence generated from Africa is used by policymakers in Africa, right? How much of it, right? Sometimes it always feels like that research evidence that is generated in Africa needs to go out first of all. It needs to be exported first, be processed, and then be brought back before it can be believable. Almost like the same way we do crude oil. When it goes out and comes back, then it's better and more believable than the one that is generated locally. And maybe that's not just for the policymakers. Maybe it's also because of how researchers sort of communicate the research that they do locally. I think you mentioned that earlier on about, communication also matters. I think that might be the case also. So I think it's probably multi-pronged, but those would be some of the issues that I would highlight as gaps. There's still a capacity gap. It's changing. It's definitely closing, right? Although I do worry, I must flag this, that as much as almost as quickly as the capacity gap is being breached, is also quickly that many of those skills are being exported out of Africa also. And again, Japa is coming up again, but definitely that's a thing here, right? Okay, so there is the capacity gap, there is the ethical gap. Again, I'm trying not to generalize, but you certainly see some of these things with IRB committees. And there is the use of the research evidence that is generated also, and how that sort of how research is done and it gets translated into some evidence-based policy making. I think that remains something that we can improve on.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Yes, and I think part of, like you said, the system, because sometimes you want to do good work, but you want it to have meaning. it can be impactful, but the bigger lasting impact is when research is translated either into clinical change or programmatic change or policy and programmatic change. And I think that we are probably lagging in catching up with data and information that's being generated and putting that into practice. So, and of course, that's humans, people in offices, at desks, in positions, but a lot of it, goes back to, I would say, government in a way, but then again, the people make up the government. So we have to push for it and lobby and try to get the right people in the right places and get them to hear our voices, Those are, I would say, academics and researchers are always usually seen as, bookies, book people. We don't push, we don't make noise, we just do our work. And a lot of that needs to change. Maybe we need to hire lobbyists to lobby for our policies. If we can't do it, then let's raise the money and get someone to do it, because, again, there's a lot of short end of the stick that academics receive, just because everybody's like, just go and read the book. Just read the book, just do the book stuff and leave the rest. We've left it and it's all a mess. So, so I guess, a lot of that also needs to change in terms of how we interact with the world, how we put our information out there. One of the thoughts that I had one time was, I was like, medical community, academic community, we are so enamored with our ideas, our work. We go to these conferences, we pat ourselves on the back. The people we are doing it up for have no idea what we're doing. They have no understanding of what we're doing. So we're writing all these highfalutin papers, coming up with all these great things, solutions, questions, but how many of them get to the layman and they can be like, oh, yeah, this was done in Michigan, this was done in London, this was done in Lagos, this was done in Abeokuta, this was done in Nairobi, and it's touching me and it's making a difference. We need to find a way to get our information out in a very relatable way to the consumers. And that's the end people. And that's the people on the streets, the people in their homes. Because a lot of all these things at the end of the day is communities, households, human beings. So I guess we need to get out of the books, out of the library a little bit and just, get social and things. So thank you very much for that. After talking about the gaps, of course, gaps lead to something, which is like areas of improvement. So I guess that question is kind of linked in terms of what are maybe 3 areas or 3 things that you think are crucial to improve research capacity and output in African countries.
Right. I would like to approach this without saying that this is across Africa, because I've seen some solid research going on across the continent. But where it is lacking, what I tend to see is that the capacity to do research is either left to chance, or there is no specific curriculum dedicated to it all the way until you mistakenly decide to say, oh, I want to do a PhD. Oh yeah, you were never taught at undergrad specifically, but you were meant to do a dissertation somehow. And all of that is typically, I think I shared somewhere quite recently that I used to get quite frustrated when I saw, the lack of innovation or creativity in how people came up with research topics in undergrad. Somebody would do knowledge, attitude, and practice among year 1 students. The second person would do knowledge, attitude, and practice among year 2 students. The third one would do knowledge, attitude, and practice among year 3 students. I'm like, what is that about? And I think it's just because people were not, generally taught how to do research or inspired on how to do anything meaningful when it comes to research. So if anything needs to change, I think capacity strengthening, from early on, as early as undergrad, will be very helpful. Countries that have done this well, I definitely will flag the Gambia as one of them. They start doing sort of those trainings quite early on. So that's definitely one. I flagged one when I talked about communication, and I think you also said the same thing about communication and how we sort of package it. This thing, a lot of this is about packaging, right? You can say something, I say something, but when you do your chat and I do my chat, your own looks like, what is this? Mine looks like, oh wow, tell me more. I think that's sort of packaging and realizing that not everybody cares about p-values, certainly not the policymakers, right? They don't even know what that means, right? So keep your p-value to the people who want to hear that and tell them the stuff that would help them change policy, right? So I think that's sort of communication. I have colleagues who, will go on the TV. You finally get your chance to speak on NTV or in Kenya or SABC in South Africa or which other one, LTV in Lagos, and then they call you chief researcher, please come and tell us something. And then you go there, start bamboozling them with all sort of big grammar, big technical jargon. Not helpful. So I think that communication, and how we communicate skills would be crucial areas that we need to improve. Third, I think is funding. When I think of countries that are doing it right, there has to be a reason why the US government, the UK government, the Swedish government, all those countries have dedicated funds, government funds, taxpayers' money to do research. And I'm wondering, why can't we do that also in African countries? I know the Tanzanian government does this quite a bit. I have a PhD student who is funded by the Tanzanian government, which is fantastic. We need to do more of that. We have, and he who pays the piper dictates the tune. If you fund your research, if the Nigerian government says, okay, this is the fund for research, whether it's TED fund or all those sort of fantastic opportunities that you see in Nigeria right now, then you can say, okay, these are our priorities. We want researchers that can work on this and work on that. And it helps to push the research capacity forward and generate policy relevant research locally. We can't keep depending on BMGF and UKRI. Truth of the matter is, if BMGF is not broke yet, UK government is definitely broke. That one, I think we can't even fund train network right now. We're looking for money. We depend on people to sponsor, to pay for visa to get to get money in the country, right? So I think governments locally need to figure out how we can raise money for research, and also philanthropists who are looking for what to do with their money locally. People are rich on the continent. Let's help you use it. Honestly, we will do some good if you can just come up with some, special funds to, which we can use to do meaningful research on the continent. So those will be the three things. Yeah, I think I mentioned capacity strengthening from the undergraduate level, how communication and how we ensure that research is translated into policy, and certainly funding. That money needs to come from somewhere.
You are right on the money. We're looking for the money, but you're right on the money. It's interesting that the last talk that we had, the speaker and comments that we got from attendees to where the government needs to do something, but they're in their own bubble. I mean, they have their set agenda. And the thing is, sometimes if you don't let people know, like, you can't be deaf to the public. You have to marry what you plan to do and what people are telling you they need. And it was really, so it's getting me thinking again, and I guess we'll power after this.
Yeah.
Because again, I just realized that this life is what you make of it, and you have to figure out where it is, how you're going to get there, and take. That's just it. Because if you don't take them, the money is going to be spent. It will be spent either buying
Sorry, I was just going to talk about the buying what's the Land Cruiser, the Toyota Land Cruiser.
I mean, the money is going to be spent. If at the end of the year is coming now, ministry people will start looking at what's left over in the budget, what's going to happen. So we have to figure out a way to put this money to good use because it's our money.
Absolutely.
Our money. So,
Absolutely.
and I think, like you said, times are changing, generations are changing. I think this millennial generation, we got a lot. Like we've seen the analog, we have experienced the digital, and we're like, no, we got to do this. So we really have to do this. And that's why we're having these talks, so we'll power about that. Now, I think my last question would be, what opportunities would you say are available for upcoming researchers, either students, undergrad, postgraduate, and that could honestly be anything, because there's AI, there's clinical, there's laboratory, there's public health, there's behavioral, there's anthropology research. What are the opportunities that you have seen in just your experience that you believe that, these are good areas to tap into for upcoming researchers?
Gotcha. I think you've mentioned quite a few of them already. And, people talk about trying to make your, I don't necessarily subscribe to it, but I think your research has to be relevant to the times, right? Climate change is a huge problem. Like, I think I made a joke to a colleague once that if you want money from anywhere right now, you're looking for research, just find out how to bring in climate change into the thing. You're settled. People want to fund climate change. Mental health is a huge space. It's a huge recognition that we have not addressed mental health issues, headlong in Africa, or we've denied them as things that were in existence, or maybe not in existence previously, and we're just beginning to realize that. I did a scoping review on adolescent mental health with a few colleagues last year, and we barely could find any study that was being done in last year. We barely could find any.
Sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. No worries. We barely could find any study on that. There's a whole digital revolution going on. You talked about AI already. There was a funding call sometime early this year by BMGF, just looking at pilot projects on how AI can be used to optimize health services. So lots of opportunities in those spaces. I think more generally that it's a good time to be an African researcher in an African institution, honestly. And I mean that with all form of sincerity. Again, I don't want to bite my tongue in the next couple of months or years, but I think the tide is turning. With the whole ongoing effort to decolonize global health, there is more opportunities for younger African researchers who are good and know their stuff to get money to do the research that they want to do. So all those topics we highlighted just a moment ago, you can get funding for those things. Funders are just they're just much more inclined to fund work in Africa led by Africans than they were ever before. Again, whether it's a tick the box exercise or whether it's a real thing or realizing that, okay, bring our money back. I don't know what movement you want to call it. It's happening. I had a mentee who won the, what was it called now? The Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center Global Cancer Disparity Grant or something like that. It's called. I think you can check it. And this fund was specifically for physicians who are from institutions in Nigeria, I believe, Nigeria. All right. That was the BMGF call, which I think is still on, actually, on strengthening health and disease modeling for public health decision making in Africa, which is funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Wellcome Trust. This is specifically for organizations that are based in Africa. I know a couple of people have reached out to me, or should we partner and do this? Duration is 3 to 5 years, and funding can be as much as £3 million. That's huge. I think £3 million in any institution in Africa would make a significant difference. not just for doing the research, but also just institutional prestige and sort of impactful work that can be done with that. And that's good for even early career researchers. Wellcome Trust also has a Wellcome Early Career Awards, which can fund salaries of researchers who are based in Africa, plus an additional £400,000 for their research expenses. Yeah, and I think it's even going to cover like allowances, or if you have to travel abroad or something like that separately, and this can be up to 5 years. So there are many of these opportunities, loads of opportunities that I think that are available for early career researchers to be able to tap into, more so now that money is coming back home.
Thank you very much for that. We are, getting close to the top of the hour, so I will stop here and ask if any one of our attendees has any questions. You can raise your hand and maybe we'll take 2 or 3 questions. Okay, let's see. All right. Mr. Hamid Adelabu, you can unmute and ask your question.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you very much also to Professor Adura for the interesting discussions all along. I just have 1 or 2 questions. Number one, I'm just wondering, multinational research does not seem to be getting the involvement of governments or ministries from the World Group. So I'm just wondering, can you share with us your key insights from your experience in ensuring that international research involves the stakeholders from the government and ensure that it contributes financial budgetaries into research anywhere along the line, and not only just to collaborate? And my second question, you mentioned earlier your experience of a paper being rejected because of the quality of data as relates to where it comes out from. So could it also be because the team does not have multinational involvements? I'm just a little bit curious. And finally, Dr. Falake mentioned regards communities, households appreciating research. I think it's also important to have a high level of transparency as researchers, and ensure that we implement a good level of PPI, that is patient-public involvement in our research. I just want to add that point. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, Dr. Aduragbemi. You can let's take the second one and then we'll wrap that up and answer that together. Miss Vera Okayo, you can ask your question.
Hi, Adura. I don't know if you remember me. I was your student like 5 years ago. I should just say it's because of your class. Guys, I attended Adura's class and I went to maternal health and never came back. I went and I went and I went. And now I'm in there as studying medical anthropology and looking at colonialism and how it affects maternal and child health in Africa. Adura, I wanted to ask you, one of the things of the challenges is that I'm a pragmatist. Like at a certain point, we have to ask ourselves, do you think there are certain ways in which we participate in making sure that we don't excel in research and also not getting the grants? What are some of the things? You've shared some of the things, but are there specific things that you think we do as African researchers that make it impossible for us to, first of all, collaborate, for us to get grants? What are some of the simple things that if you're given the power in Nigeria or Kenya, where I know you did your research, that you change? Thank you.
Okay. I can go for it, right? I can go for all the questions, right? Oh, thank you very much. Thank you so much. It's so lovely to hear you, Hamid and Vera. Oh, wow. So Hamid, you talked about this, multinational research, and that, maybe not get the support of the government from the word go. I think that's changing now. I think even if you apply for a funding, the funder is demanding to say, have you engaged the government? Have you asked them what they want? Or, by the time you're applying, you're meant to justify that, the research is motivated by needs within the country. However, if what you're saying is that government should make financial contributions, I think that links to the point that I was making earlier. That remains a work in progress. And hopefully we would get there. We do not have at least I'm not aware of any pot of money that governments across African countries are meant to contribute towards for research. I'm not aware of that. However, there are national pots that governments have to support research. And I think those pots can stay separately from the multinational ones or the international ones. Let the international money come in, let the national one also come in. I think it's fine. The paper being rejected, honestly, like and your question was, could it be because it didn't have any multinational involvement? It doesn't need to have any multinational involvement. The validity of the research is it was clearly stated. This was extensive, innovative work that had been done by my team and which I proudly led. That paper is published in another top journal now, but I think I highlighted that example for you to show that those challenges exist, and we're fighting every day. The good thing is that we're beginning to get many people from Africa also holding some senior positions in some of those journals. So that's good. We have obviously BMG Global Health, where Sheya Bimbola is editor-in-chief. That's fantastic. He's experienced it from publishing himself, and now he's editor-in-chief, and many other examples like that, so the more we keep getting people, at that level, hopefully that should change. The validity of any research is not dependent on the multinationality. No. You can do one in your little suburb in wherever, and if research methods are sound, it should still be relevant. I hope I've answered your question. Vera, your question, I'm so proud of you, and well done for all the phenomenal work you're doing and pushing on to medical anthropology. Really well done. Really well done. Your question was, do we have a certain way that we do things that does not allow us to excel? Again, I do not want to generalize this across Africa, right? But I know that there are certain countries where, this is how we do. When we have an idea, this is how you hide it. Hold it like this gradually, like, please, before I go and they now go and know, and then, they steal my idea, which can be founded. I know there are some people who, unfortunately, even wrote just one simple master's dissertation, and the supervisor published it without telling them, like this sort of scandalous nonsense happens, in parts of, our continent. And, there's the research integrity is zero in some places, right? So I understand where you're coming from, where you ask that question. I think that sort of, I'm keeping it to myself, does not foster for collaboration. Of course, you have to guard your work from people who are not nice or who will do exactly what I described a moment ago. But I think that feeling like I can go alone, which you tend to see quite a bit, I don't think it helps us excel in, on the bigger front. So if we have to change something, maybe that's something I could add also, that, let's be more of course, choose your colleagues carefully, right? But I think that would be one way, making sure that we are willing to sort of share. We mentioned the other one on communication right? I don't know who has English as their first language. It certainly wasn't mine, but that's okay also. It just therefore means you have to do a bit more to sort of polish and make sure that, just be attention to detail and just be thorough when you're submitting research proposals or applying for grants. Remember also, and I think I used that word earlier on, is all about the package. You have the same idea of, submission A and submission B. If the packaging of submission A is better than submission B, even if submission B is a smarter person than submission A, the one that would attract any smart funder will be submission A. So I think how you package and put it together and make a compelling case of why your research is important, not just that it's important, but it's particularly important now, would make a difference. So I hope those help, Vera, to sort of put you even further up on the competitive thread that we all are on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those extensive answers. As we wrap up, I'm just going to mention someone said they joined late and they wanted to find out if question basically is how do African researchers navigate the expenses to publish in high-ranking journals?
Okay, I can speak to that. Quick, I can speak to that definitely. Again, fantastic time to be African. I'm just like, I just choose where I want to be aligned to. There are lots of journals these days that have dedicated funding for countries who are low and middle income countries. By the way, if you're Nigerian, you'll be surprised to know that Nigeria might not be on that list. Sometimes, just because you're expected to have more money, it's Nigeria, giant of Africa, right? But you have several journals within the Springer Nature series, plus Global Public Health, which I'm section lead for the maternal newborn health. We certainly also do publish papers with waivers for African researchers. So I think, first of all, is for you to not limit yourself with the journals that you know. Try to there are several journals. What is the purpose of publishing a journal? It is to get your message out there. Of course, don't put it in some journal that is not indexed on PubMed. If you think the merit of what you want to publish is significantly high, then aim for high, as high as possible as you want to get to. But please just be smart in selecting the journals that you go for. There are loads of journals, like I've mentioned some publishers, Springer Nature, the Plus series. They have pots of money dedicated to research that is being led by people from LMICs. If your specific country is not there, or maybe it's 50% waiver from Nigeria, get a friend in Kenya or Burundi or wherever to publish with you, and just humbly take the second author, they take the first author or something, be dynamic about it. There are ways around it for sure. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much, Dr. Banke-Thomas, for just spending your time with us and sharing this extensive wealth of knowledge. We hope that this, will synthesize something better and be able to move forward from there. We will be wrapping it up today. And like I said, thank you again. I can't thank you enough. And we hope that, next year we're taking the conversation further and doing more than just talking. Honestly, by next year, we hope doing more than talking. So as we are acting, we are talking and we are saying what we are doing and we're telling you the results and all of that. So so thank you very much. For our attendees, I did put in the chat, follow us on social media. You can sign up for our newsletter. I'm putting that, it's at the bottom of the page that I just posted. Follow us on social media. Our newsletter, we share a lot of updates on what we do. The organization is a non-profit organization. We work in communities for sustainable development. We focus on healthcare, and in our work in healthcare in communities, we've scaled that up to have a low-cost clinic. So the clinic is a program of the nonprofit, and the nonprofit works to subsidize care for people, just because, you know, and again, with constant inflation, it's just making it worse and worse. So we have to do that. So that's what we do. The research is one of our objectives. So we have healthcare, research, and community development. And this research part is what we're doing here. So our Twitter link is just, once you type Amal Outreach, you would find us there, but I can also post that in the chat, you know, Amal Outreach. Oh, I think Ganiyat is on here, and she can post that in the chat.
Thank you. The link, yeah, it's there.
Yeah. So thank you very much.
Can I just say,
oh yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Can I just say a big thank you, really, Dr. Kofoido, for first of all inviting me to this. I'm really honored, and I hope some of the things we shared, you know, will, you know, do something for people to sort of help. And I'm just immensely proud of what you're doing, you know, by the way, not just what you're doing on this platform, but what you're doing everywhere, you know, more so on the ground and supporting clinics. And I don't know how you're doing it, but you're really super proud of it. Please just keep cracking on. We'll be hailing from the side, and we'll be publishing paper on what you're doing. Okay, well done.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Again, you know, everybody's wondering how, because I'm also looking and you're telling all these things, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Everybody's doing, you know, we're all doing great stuff everywhere. And, you know, development, health, human life, where it's multifaceted, is multi-layered, and everybody has value to add in their own capacity. I might not be a core researcher. I'm very community development, but, you know, maternal health, we can always pull stuff from that to put into community development, because it's important, just as you can, you know, bring someone else who's doing sexual reproductive, someone who is doing anthropology research. So like you said in the beginning, is us working together. There's an intersection, because a human being has so many things going on. So it means that all fields of study really can intersect on how we can improve lives of people in different places. So I will keep it there, and, you know, like I said, we'll powwow and chat after this. So thank you to everyone for your attendance. I really appreciate it. We have our next and last session for the year in December. We definitely will send the communique out early enough. Please follow us on social media and sign up for our newsletter so you can get our updates. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, thanks to everyone. Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.